I want to first start here this Q&A video to tell you that it's an ever-evolving situation, and that the answers I'm providing today are to the best of my ability and to the knowledge that I have in this moment. Everything is subject to change, and we will update as soon as we have different information. So don't lock on these words as being an absolute, fixed component, but look at this as this is what we know, and we're going to pledge to communicate on an ongoing basis. I want to thank you for the opportunity to serve you as mayor. I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here and lead our great city to the extent that I can. I think it's commonly acknowledged that I don't have a vote and that I am a consensus maker. That is the primary job of the mayor. And we will continue to work as mayor in trying to build consensus that brings best value to the citizens of the city of Rocky Mount. And so I have here with me today my Chief of Staff, Carrie Cox, and she's going to ask me a couple of questions just because the flow back and forth when you're talking to somebody is much different than when you're reading. And I think that it feels better as a viewer. So Carrie, if you'll ask me what you think, then the first question is that we're getting most commonly. And so these questions and these answers are based primarily on the questions that we're getting for the last 3 days, the most popular. And we'll continue to update those as well. We'll update the answers if they ever change, and we'll update with new questions as they arise. So Carrie?
What exactly happened with the city's finances?
So the city's finances is a situation where we've overspent. As I look at it, it appears to be, at this point in time, primarily related to overhiring situation where we've hired approximately 200 full-time equivalents over the last 3-4 years, and we paid them outside of our pay and comp study. So outside of the allowable ranges that we had agreed on should be something we should do. So we've hired more FTEs at higher rates, and that is a biggest component of the expenditure of the funds that we are looking at. In addition, there are a couple capital items, and I want to point out this is why we have a forensic audit coming through, and this is why I'm excited that the auditor's here. They will be able to describe for us exactly where the money went, and we'll disclose that as soon as we know.
Who is responsible?
The city council is ultimately responsible. That's just the truth. They vote on the budget, they approve the budget. However, with that said, I will say that I believe that every member of council voted on the budgets, assuming that they were budget neutral. In other words, that the revenues met the expenses, and it was the best information they had in that moment in time. What we didn't get was the accountability of the reports, key performance indicators, KPIs. We had none of that information.
So you were making key decisions with bad information?
Absolutely. That's absolutely the case. It got to the place, and I'm sure that's one of the questions here, but it got to the place we had to mandate that the city manager at the time produce for us all of the information on a monthly basis. He failed to do that, and so as a result, ended up on administrative leave.
How could the city council allow this to go on for so long?
City council really didn't have an awareness of what was going on. If you don't have financial reports, you don't have KPIs or key performance indicators, you don't have copies of the bank balance, you're not looking at the balance sheet, you're not provided the balance sheet, it's very difficult to know what's happening. While the city council acts really as a board, so its primary job is to hire and fire a manager. Its primary job is not to engage in the day-to-day business of the city, nor does that really ever happen. So to the extent that the manager is not working, we fire the manager and we hire a new manager. But that doesn't necessarily answer, do you get the accurate information on a daily basis?
Didn't you see any budgets or statements showing the overspending in the last few years?
We saw several budgets, but they showed that we were generating actually surplus in our enterprise funds. And so, no, we did not see anything that showed a negative. We did get eventually some expense reports, but expense reports without the revenue, without a copy of what the budget was for that particular month, really is just numbers. So unless there is some anchor there to tell you that it's over or under, you're doing good or you're doing bad, it's just numbers. And so we didn't have any kind of relative data to be able to suggest that we were in bad trouble.
How is the city of Rocky Mount going to fix the situation?
We're unfortunately going to have to reduction in force. We're going to have to RIF approximately 10% of our full-time employees and about 50% of those that are working part-time for us. I'm not sure exactly what that means in terms of whole numbers or FTEs, but it's going to be a significant emotional event. And look, I want to point out, I feel for these folks. They're real people with real jobs, real families, and this is not something that we're doing lightly. In fact, the city's going to do everything it can possibly do to make sure they transition and assist them in any way that makes sense, that we can afford to do, and it creates the best outcome for our staff.
What about interacting with the state auditor and the LGC?
So we have called the LGC the day before we made the announcement. We have been engaged with the LGC each time. At this point in time, they've not indicated that they feel that this has risen to the level of having to come over and take over the city's operations. However, the state auditor has come into the city. They told me that I'm not supposed to tell that, but I've already been telling everybody. Because, look, we have a confidence issue. And I welcome them, and I'm excited that the auditor's here. And it's their investigative team. So that tells me it's going to be a forensic-like audit, and it'll probably take 4 to 5, 6 months for that to be completed. At the conclusion of that, we will follow up with an independent, privately hired forensic accountant firm if we need to. That report may give us everything we need.
So how is this audit going to be different from the audit that was done in 2021?
So the audit was done in 2024. Just a different... 2021, I'm sorry. So, it's just a different rules of engagement. In 2021, Beth Wood was our state auditor. Her job was to go and just basically say what you've done right or wrong. And then it was up to the local governing body to make decisions as to what you're going to do. And if you recall, in 2021, I asked for resignations. I had press conferences. I called the AG at the time, who was Josh Stein, and said, hey, look, would you come in and do an investigation? He said, no. I called the DA at the time. Would you press charges? He said, I don't think it rises to the level of criminality. I did all the things that I felt like we needed to do to create that transparency and to make sure that our citizens were well served. But what's different this time is the state auditor now has an enforcement power. He, in this case, can actually go and bring charges to bear for things that he believes is criminal in this outcome. And he'll take it to court, and we'll be able to prosecute wrongdoers. And that's significant and a big deal, and I'm excited by it. Now, with that said, I really don't feel like in my heart of hearts that there's been any shenanigans that have gone on, but I think we need to answer that question for me, for our citizens, and for our council.
If you do find out there were illegal deeds, what will you do? I'm
committed to make sure that we press charges. And in this case, the state auditor has that enforcement capacity and capability. And I'm sure, knowing Mr. Bullock as well as I do, I am sure that he is not going to let anything happen that he would not enforce the law as he sees it.
How will this affect day-to-day city services?
It shouldn't at all. It shouldn't at all. In fact, we're having to do this reduction in force so that we are a fiscally sound and healthy city going forward. We're still going to provide police protection. We're still going to have, peerless fire department. We're still going to pick up your trash. We're still going to have Parks and Rec. We still have Little League. Those things won't change. And I like to point out, when I first became mayor, now, you look at our numbers today and look at them then, we measured in FTE, which means that full-time equivalent. So the total number of hours that we pay divided by 2040 creates one full-time equivalent. And so you may have, that number was approximately 835. And today that FTE number is over 1,000. I've seen numbers bounce between, 1015 and 1045. I don't know exactly where we are today, but it's approximately 200 full-time equivalents have been increased over that period of time, without regard to the pay and comp study, without regard to the budget. And so that's really what has left us where we are today.
So can you explain why the utility bills are going to be increasing?
So the utility bills really were brought to head because of the issue that we have, right? So for years, and I mean years, we have subsidized the utility bills, electric and gas. And what I mean by that is we have not had enough revenue to cover our expenses in those particular enterprise funds. Gas in particular is no different than when you go fill up your car every week. right? It may be $2.43 today. It may be $3 next week. It may be $2.75 the following week. You just don't know. It's a commodity pricing. And the same is true for natural gas. And so for our commercial customers, we've been passing that cost along as a commodity forever. For our residential customers, we have not. We've set a price and we've just held to it for the year. In the last 2 or 3 years, we have been underwater on that. We have subsidized that. And we're just simply asking that people pay what the cost of the gas is with, our overhead, because it costs money to make sure that the pipelines are established, that we have folks working and carry on. Electricity, same story. We've had to put a lot of infrastructure cost in, and we have not been able to compensate ourselves for that. We've not been able to cover that cost. And we've been doing that through our general fund, and we just simply cannot afford to continue to do that. Now, this was something that was going to happen in April, regardless. I mean, we were that place. That's when we set our numbers typically. It's around April, May. But unfortunately, we found ourselves in a position we could no longer subsidize those fees.
How about the 336 acres purchased by the city? Can you sell that and to solve this problem?
Well, here's what we can do. We paid approximately $17 million for that land, and we put $5 million down, and we financed approximately $12 million. $12 million. And so it's interest-only payment. So our carry costs, in other words, the amount of money that we pay every year to have the privilege of owning that land, is about $800,000. So if we sold it for what we paid for it today, we would end up with $5 million that we put down, and we would reduce the expense of $800,000 a year. So I don't think that fixes our problem. I don't think, while that is additional money, I think the better utilization is to try to develop that property. If we were to project it out, I believe that the market value of that land, once developed, is somewhere between $250,000 to $300,000. If you extend that out, it becomes a very big number. And the city of Rocky Mount should be able to have $80 million. But that's not even the deal. The deal is, do we develop what we want? Do we develop the live, work, play environment? Do we deliver something that is bringing heads in beds and creating sales tax and creating ad valorem taxes and creating utility customers that benefit the city of Rocky Mount so that our citizens don't have to pay that? I think that we need to take a longer term view. And that really underscores, I think, where we are. We're having to make decisions in necessity of trying to save money in the short term, but we don't want to save the wrong money. We don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And so I think 336 actually demonstrates that question and that dilemma probably better than anything else we have.
So how will you prevent this from happening again?
So I really think that our challenge began when Amy Stanton, who was our director of finance, left our organization some 5 years ago-ish, and her staff began to follow her to Wilson, which you would imagine. I mean, she was a great leader, very competent, ran our finance department for many, many, many years. But as a result, somewhere between 4.5 to 5 years, 6 years, I mean, I don't know the exact time, but a long time, we didn't have anybody to have those internal controls. And so that wasn't a problem until it was a problem. And so when you have a new person coming in who has not reconciled the books, has not given us accurate reports, and a manager that has accelerated spending, there are no controls to flag for city council. This is a challenge for us. And again, if you're not seeing monthly statements of your expenses and you're having to fight for that, you don't even have the relative scale, a relative barometer of, okay, this feels higher than last month, and let's talk about it. So we've had to fight for that. In fact, to approve the last budget that we had in the previous administration, we had to pass an ordinance that required him and his team to provide us with that financial information. And we got some, but I don't think it was accurate. So today, though, we have a great finance director and Mrs. Spivey, and I have so much confidence in her ability and capability. She used to work with the LGC. She is dotting the I's and crossing the T's, and she's getting it done. And I believe the numbers that I'm seeing today, and she's committed to get it to us. So the short answer is we'll put checks and balances in place. And we had those in place once upon a time, but when people left, the systems fell apart. And that's part of what we probably should have been a great barometer. And I'm upset by this. I really am, but hindsight's hindsight. We can do this going forward.
So to clarify, there were finance directors or interim finance directors in place, but they were not up to the skill level needed.
If they were, they didn't demonstrate it. So that is correct.
How will you help the employees who are being let go?
We're going to do everything we possibly can. We've called the chamber. They're prepared to do a job fair. I know the city of Rocky Mount is going to do a job fair. Actually had that in place already prior to this. We're going to look and see what we can afford in terms of assistance, financial assistance as we go forward. So we're going to do everything we can do because, again, these are real people, real jobs. My heart goes out. It's heavy as a result of that. But, if the city's not healthy, nobody's healthy.
So, as you know, Rocky Mount is a poor city. How will everyone be able to pay these increased utility bills?
We're going to do everything we can do to work with people that find themselves in a place that they can't do it. It may look like a financing program. It may look like, some grace as it relates to timing and paying. I am personally going to contribute to the Warm Fund, and I would encourage anybody watching this who has, a little bit of income to consider doing something like that because it will make a big difference, particularly for our elderly, for those who are on fixed incomes. This is going to be a real challenge for them. And while it does just get us to break even, we're not making money on this, it's still a burden for a lot of people.
So I've got some rumors that I want you to clarify.
All right, can't wait.
Will employees get paid on time?
Employees will continue to be paid on time. In fact, that's part of this initiative is to make sure that we are financially solvent and we're in good stead and we can pay our employees and pay for all the services that people expect.
Are the police and fire departments fully staffed and ready to assist in emergencies?
They are fully staffed. There is no intention I'm aware of that we're going to reduce the force there. We're going to continue to provide public safety and fire protection.
Will trash continue to be picked up?
Trash will continue to be picked up on the regular schedule, and you should see no impact to that.
Do you have any final words?
I think really I do. For me, in the city of Rocky Mount, I ran because I'm a native son to Rocky Mount, and this is a place that I hold very near and dear to my heart. I believe in us as a community. I believe that we will get through this. I have done everything that I know to do to continue to push us forward, to transact as openly as I possibly can to all the residents in our city, in our great city. I have given away my salary, and I don't say that for accolades. What I do say, though, is that I feel like it's an opportunity, it's just another way to continue to serve the citizens of Rocky Mount, and we'll continue to do that. This is about love. It's about love for city. It's about a place that I hold special. I know everybody else does, and we'll continue to make it through this. Now, I believe with God's help, I believe He will bless the city. I believe that we will emerge much stronger, healthier, leaner, meaner, and more proactive going forward. Everything serves a purpose. Everything works to the glory of God. In this case, we're going to find out what that looks like on the other side. I will say, though, we have a lot of folks out in social media just really, attacking our current staff. We have a team. They've got a job. And I would ask for some sensitivity to where they are to help them achieve what they need to for us. Otherwise, this is not the time for those fights. There may be a day for that. Maybe it's in 6 months. Maybe it's in a year. But today, it's an all hands on deck situation, and we need to plow forward to create the best outcomes we can for our great city.